jump in at the beginning and just say, hey, ask any questions or whatever. But the last couple of weeks, it's been giving me an error and I can't figure out why. No.
Don't know about that one.
Yeah. All right, cool. Looks like we're live. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Node.js tooling group, whatever they are, cadre, I don't know. Who wants to drive today? Anyone?
I can run through the agenda.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I'll help notes.
Okay, let's see. First up, we have the recursive copy issue. Don't actually remember where we left this one last time. People were going to review the RFC. I think we decided that it was probably good enough.
I think one action item we had was just kind of maybe reaching out to the folks who work on FS Extra and seeing if they could be a good candidate for the foundation for recursive copy, just so we don't reinvent the whole thing from scratch.
Yeah, you're right about that. I did not do that. I've been trying to get better organized this year about keeping notes and keeping track of all of these like action items and stuff. So I've got that on my list here now. Does anyone know of a good way to reach those people? Like one of the various Slacks or Twitter or something else?
I'd be tempted to flag them on the issue and tooling and just see if you get feedback. They can be found. There's two folks. They were active in the thread where we were removing the experimental flag from Rimder Recursive. So you should be able to find the folks from those threads.
Okay, I will do that right after this meeting. Yeah, that's a good idea, I guess. Get them maybe commenting on the tooling issue before we open the larger issue.
Cool.
Okay, I don't think we really have anything else to talk about on that one then, unless someone has something they want to bring up.
No, makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, hopefully by next time we can get a little bit of feedback there. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda then is ES module reloading and module graph.
So I followed up on this last week, and we got a kind of a bit of a conversation going with the folks who rate, what's it called? I keep forgetting the name. Quibble. Yes. So there is a userland tool, and there was some interesting conversation that came out of it as well. That I think, I think Dino facilitates this in their platform. So Dino has been thinking about how to do it. Someone linked how Dino does it in the conversation. So
yeah, I'm just reading up on this now.
I don't know if there's any real action item for us. Like it might be worth taking off the agenda. I think like if something's seems like it's being supported okay in the community. I'm a little curious about what Dino's built in.
Just looking quickly at the conversation here. Where did that go? Someone says you can use the same method as Dino, adding like hash number that indicates that this is a new iteration of the module.
Yeah, the last comment gives an example of that, if that's helpful.
Oh, is there more? Right. Yeah, so this is kind of like, I mean, how you would do like invalidation in a browser, right? Yeah, put a hash at the end of the thing. I guess the issue with that would be you're never unloading the old modules, right? You're just going to keep loading a new one, which for something like a watching like test mode could be an issue, but maybe not. I don't know.
All right. So maybe keep on the agenda in case we could make it a little easier. Might be worth talking to. I don't know if there's any immediate action items, are there?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you that maybe there isn't. I keep expecting this issue to like blow up somewhere, you know, not our like tooling issue, but like for people to start reporting issues on like the main repo or something, but it hasn't happened. So maybe it's not really a problem.
I mean, Node 12 goes LTS, or Node 12 becomes the LTS in what, a month or two, right? April, is that right?
You mean Node 14?
Well, Node 12 will be the oldest version that's not end of life, I think.
Oh, I
would
see.
be a better way to say it. Yeah. So it will be at which point every version of Node that's not end of life will be supporting ESM. So I think we might see maybe some more ESM related stuff once that happens.
Yeah, it's true. The fact that it hasn't happened yet doesn't necessarily mean there's not a problem, just that maybe people aren't really using that functionality too much yet.
Yeah, hasn't hit that apex yet.
I think maybe, maybe we can remove it from the agenda, but maybe we'll leave the issue open so we can revisit it at some point if that does happen.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, I just removed it from the agenda. Does anyone have anything else they want to add on that before we move on? No, okay. The next two on here, I think actually I meant to take these off. This was the support for hooking spawn sync, and a better way to detect the process is exiting. Oh, actually the process exiting you were gonna work on, right, Ben?
Yeah, I'd be curious to look into that a little more.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's the like really exit one. Like I would like to look at that because I've run into that a few times and think it's a little crappy. So I kind of want to look at it. I just removed the label from the other one because I think it's been kind of we've been saying we're going to remove it for a few weeks and just not removing it. So
yeah, I cleaned up a couple after the last meeting and I must have missed that one. So
cool.
Okay, so we'll skip over that one and remove it from the agenda for the future. Is there, in terms of the detecting a process is exiting, is there anything you want to mention there, Ben, or have you not had a chance to look at it yet?
I haven't really done anything yet, no.
Okay. All right, we're really flying through this meeting.
Which is good because we got some other stuff to talk about too at the end, the argument parsing stuff.
Yeah,
cool.
And actually I have a couple, or at least one new thing I wanted to add as well. So
cool.
Next up, SportsMath v3, any updates there?
I keep threatening to make a PR. I'm going to re-threaten to make the PR hopefully this weekend maybe, because I just need to delete some code and I do want to get it out the door sooner rather than later. So I will try to open a PR screen. Ben?
Or who are you threatening with this PR?
I think I'm threatening myself that I'm going to open a PR. But yeah, basically, literally all I have to do is delete some code that's being overly clever and just make it so it remaps the source maps, but if you tell it to, and doesn't invent a new stack trace format, which I think hindsight 2020 was a bad idea. So I'll actually open that PR and maybe this weekend get it going.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so yeah, I mean, the last thing on the agenda is argument parsing. I maybe have something quick to bring up before that, if you guys want to spend some more time at the end of the meeting on argument parsing.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so just something we talked about, I think, in the last couple meetings is we have the recursive RM function in Node now. We've deprecated the recursive rim_dir option. And I was saying I was going to open a PR to actually remove the deprecated code. Turns out someone else did that earlier this week. So there is a PR for that. Let me link it here.
If I think I read that PR, they were actually, that thread turned into such a long thread about the renaming and deprecation and everything. It seemed like were they just making it so Rimdir with recursive is no longer permissive? Like it throws errors in more cases, or did they completely remove the option?
I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing, because so far the only discussion on this PR is just one comment from me. But their initial approach, I think they did kind of what you were talking about there, where they made it. Oh, sorry.
I added a link to what the PR links to, and there's more comments here. Maybe that's what Ben's talking about.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, sorry, I meant the like the conversation around the deprecation, or the conversation around calling Rimdir recursive stable was a really long conversation. And I think where I lost thread was whether we were going to leave the recursive option on Rimdir, but make it behave less permissively, which is, I think, is what this PR is, because this PR is, I think, throwing errors if you try to Rimdir a file, I think, or if you try to Rimdir so just something that doesn't exist. Is that what it is, right? Yeah.
So that's what it was initially, but then I suggested maybe we just remove it entirely, which I think they changed the PR to do, which maybe was not the right call. I also don't remember where we landed on that discussion, now that I think about it.
Sorry, I'm just reading this PR. Yeah, see, this PR is definitely just throwing, like, I'm just reading the docs for it in like deprecations.md. Oh, it's sorry, end of life. And sorry, I'm reading I thought I was reading the usage docs. My bad. Okay. I'm just being confusing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it again now. It looks like on my suggestion, they changed it to just completely remove that functionality. But maybe that's not the approach we want to take.
No, I think we should just revisit let's revisit the decision we made with the TSC and just make sure we match it. And I think I'm blanking on whether the decision was to completely remove or to just leave the permissive behavior in Rimdir, or sorry, I'm using the wrong, to leave it in Rimdir but make it stricter. I forget if that was what we decided with the TSC or whether we decided to remove it entirely when in discussion with the TSC. And we should retrace that thread and remember which one we want to go with.
Right. Yeah, I had thought we wanted to remove it entirely, but now that you mention it, I'm not 100% on that. So I agree with you. We should, do some reading up on that and before kind of taking this PR.
Maybe we can even find the recording of the TSC where we presented. I think that was like a few months ago, and like it was a really good conversation. I think Matteo gave a really good path forward.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I know we did try to summarize the plan in this issue, but you're right, this did kind of turn into a long discussion. So yeah, I guess in terms of next steps, just revisiting that discussion and the decision we made, and then do that thing in the PR. I was maybe a bit hasty in suggesting they change the PR to remove the functionality entirely.
Yeah, that's where I got confused, I think, just because they'd gone the one route and then we were talking about the other route. So I'm just have lost the thread now.
Yeah. Okay. So just maybe I see some notes here that we'll just revisit that conversation. I'll make a note for myself to do that as well. Okay, so I guess that's kind of the next step there. Does anyone have any other quick new stuff, or should we get into the argument parsing discussion?
Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it.
So I feel like we're going to be retreading some history here, and I apologize that last year when I know Ben and Chris and Roy had been discussing this, I didn't get more involved at that time. Oh, Ben just noted. What is this?
This is from the prior conversation. Ignore me. I just
okay. But I just wanted to know if you want to put it on record. Yeah.
I'll put it on.
Cool. Yeah. So so I apologize. I want to start out by apologizing about not being more involved at that time. I know Chris put a lot of effort into sort of the proposal and then the actual implementation back in, I think, August, September timeframe as well. So I sat down with Joe async last Friday to sort of go over. So I did a lot of reading in terms of the thread and the PR there, and then also like looking at the implementation that Chris put together for parsargs, which I thought was great. Like I think there's a lot of good like I think the implementation is really good. The sort of changes or ideas that I had and sort of spoke with Joe about essentially try to thread the needle of the feedback that seemed to be blocking, moving forward. So I put together a couple docs that I can share here, and sort of maybe walk you folks through. And again, like feel free to give feedback as we kind of walk through this. But I started essentially with looking at the three major items or three major pieces of feedback that I saw in the PR that seemed to be sort of like blocking folks from really accepting the work as it was. So is it possible? I'm going to share my screen. Is that cool?
Yep.
Cool.
If it works.
Cool. So let's start with actually that's the current states. Let's go to sort of like, I guess, the like problem statement I sort of came out of this, or like the three main things that I saw in the feedback, which were people seem to have a big problem with sort of the coercion and like the options being, there seems to be a difference between the definition of and the declaration of options being passed to your program. Also, it seemed to be that the options nomenclature or naming of things within the docs themselves and also within the options for the API kind of got a bit overloaded. So it was a bit terse to like read the docs and figure out what exactly was going on. And then it seemed also that folks wanted a bit stricter API in terms of whether or not a string or array could be returned from parsargs. So these seem to be like the three things that as far as I could tell, like from grokking sort of the feedback were the big things. Folks can correct me if they thought there were other items that people really, essentially.
The only other one that I remember was around whether or not we should throw if the args pass didn't meet whatever criteria or definition, or like if a required arg was missing. But maybe that wasn't as big of a deal as I remember it being.
I think that's what ultimately made Chris throw up his hands. So it's like that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back at least. So probably worth having on the list.
So correct me then there. It was defining the arguments that would essentially allow it to throw an error. Like the
I think it would. So go ahead, Ian. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like, let's say you've passed like like an argument that it's supposed to be a string and you passed a number, or there's a required argument and you didn't pass it, or something like that. It was really just on any error. Should the parser throw an exception, or should it maybe return like an object of with a list of errors that you could handle? I think that was kind of the debate, if I'm remembering correctly.
So I think the reason why this last point, and I do remember this now, didn't really come up for me as I was ideating on how to like address a lot of the feedback, was that I started out with the first bullet point and tried to like parse, forgive my bad pun, but try to essentially figure out how we could make everybody happy, and try to really also figure out what the problem with like the current solution was. So let me just throw open up here the final sort of like docs as it was essentially created by Chris for essentially parse args. So if we look at this, I don't see anything specifically about throwing. So potentially that was the feedback that, you know, like what do we do in these cases? So, you know, the idea that I've had is that, you know, parse args should actually be less try to do less coercion. In fact, like no coercion at all. Another big thing I saw with this implementation was the handling of like falsy values. So there were certain cases where I think they were coercing like false specifically to like Boolean. So the idea would be actually to not just provide a singular options return value, but to actually split those out into two separate things, which is the declared parsed arguments that were passed, and then a separate object that would essentially be the string values that were. So we don't do anything with Booleans, you don't do anything with casting, you don't do any coercion at all, you don't do any validation. So you kind of get away from the like having to handle the exceptions. So you pass in an array of strings, you're going to get back strings still as the values, and then it's up to you as the consumer of that of this API to then do any kind of validation or coercion on those values if you'd like to, right? So that's kind of like how I think this is the reason why I think that in the problem statement here, I've sort of gotten away from it. And you can see some initial, further down into this doc, I actually get into a whole bunch of examples. But the idea, the change here would be that, you know, we've split these two things out. There's args and there's values. And args essentially would be the representation that something was declared, like an argument or option was passed, and that will always be Boolean, always be true. It won't always be true, but it will always be a Boolean. So this will basically give you what you would like, probably in the 99% percentile of times, for sort of those quick CLIs that you're trying to create, those quick, programs that you want to pass like a flag to, and you want to quickly see whether or not it was declared. This is the perfect thing for you, right? So if we go down, I actually will show you the proposal. So this would essentially be the change made. So that not just do we split out, args and values, but we'd actually also change just the name a little bit of the two options. So again, we're not completely changing, the API that much. We would go from options with value to just with value. Options, again, trying to reduce the overloaded options nomenclature. We will also be prescriptive here. Before, you could provide, I believe, a string and array or array. So if there was only a singular flag, you could provide a string, but here we would actually be prescriptive, where we would say it has to always be an array. This was another sort of like piece of feedback, that both of these options essentially are always arrays of strings. So again, like being a little bit more prescriptive there, I think would actually like get more people on board and make more people happy. And then in terms of like the return value, this is sort of the also a bit more prescriptive on what parse args would take. So essentially, you're not going to be able to take like an object. Like I think that this default value is kind of weird. Like it will have a default, but I think it's weird that if there's an object provided, like I feel like that's a weird. I don't know. I don't know any other method that sort of like falls back to that. Like it should either error out, and I haven't specified that, but there's something should throw if you're providing a non-array, like a string value or something to parse args. So the return values, I imagine, again, would change into essentially an object that has the properties corresponding Boolean values of the declared options that were passed to the program, whereas the values object that gets returned would actually be those same properties with string values. And so in this case, in this first example, you can start to see, how you could essentially use this. Positionals doesn't change, like the concept of the positionals and how they get parsed won't change at all. Same with the multiples API. I think that's all great. I don't think there's anything really required there. Does anybody have any questions about sort of like these changes or this kind of like way of I know, Ben, like I'm excited to hear what you have.
I'm curious, like what happens if I do, like, so if say I have the argument -- enable HTTP, and I've passed it no arguments, so it's going to be, in this scheme, it's going to be true, right? What happens if I pass a value false to it? Like, is that so if I pass the string false, yeah, I pass the string false. What's set in the two arrays at that point?
Oh, here's an example of that. Yeah.
What if I pass? So if I pass false, it's going to be args.foo will be true and values.foo will be false, basically. But a string of false.
String false. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And I think, and what this gets away from is it does give you the foundation, like to build. The key is getting away from like the validation aspect of this. But like I created an example of essentially how you could do something a little bit more verbose, yeah, and essentially start to validate or even like recreate, like yargs essentially. But
I think the other question,
these, like,
yeah, that makes sense. The other question I have is why we would, like, if we could you go up to where you write the docs for it a little bit, like you were at a little earlier, yeah. So I'm not quite seeing the difference between, like, if with value is always an array, like, do we need both multiples and with value? Like if you only provide one value to an argument, is it just an array with one value in it?
Yeah. So I was originally thinking that this could be, like an object, right? But I want to try to map this as closely to what I said originally. Yeah.
Because I kind of think like the two cases I think we were trying to cover that are maybe could use a different configuration name are, there's kind of two scenarios. There's I'm going to accept 10 copies of foo versus I want to only use the last value I was provided of foo. If you just always, like, I think with your simplified approach, you wouldn't even need both of those configuration settings, to be honest. Like, I think, I'm just thinking the only annoying thing is, like, if the value was always an array of strings, then you could implement both approaches, because if you only want to use the last value, you just take the very last thing in the list, and that's what you've set the argument to. And if you want to accept an array of values, you just use the whole array. So it kind of, if you give people the information they need to build the parser, maybe you don't even need to provide those two configuration options, is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I'm imagining the 99% case is truly this, like where you're going to use, these two lines. You're going to essentially do parse args and use the args, whether or not the flag or option that you've provided is there. Not necessarily the value, and that's where I've tried to like really delineate like the problem space, so that like we don't have to try to play in the coercion or inference of like the values, and if we don't touch those and leave them as strings, I think that's where we're gonna get more.
I like that. I like that idea. I think that I'm just coming around to, I don't think you need to even have that array handling stuff at that point. I think I would just make it
multiples so that, and the with values.
I agree with Ben. Now that he's articulated that makes sense to me.
I also agree, and I was going to say I do kind of like the idea of splitting out like the presence of an argument versus the value, because I think that's where some of that coercion came in. Like, okay, this value is undefined. Does that mean they passed undefined? Does that mean they didn't pass it at all? Like, so I do like the being more explicit about that.
Yep.
So like this is an example of like all three essentially being defined and like what you would get in this case. Yeah.
No, I really like this, because I think if you're like building a really simple CLI that takes arguments like that are values, then you just use the values, so it's just always values foo. If you just do care about booleans, you're usually only using args foo.
Right.
And I don't think we lose any information, do we? Right? Which is really nice.
There's no information loss at all. It's just that by breaking those two things out, I think you really have, we don't have to play again. I started to show how you could essentially start to create like validation and like essentially walk over these objects. You could even essentially like do a spread operation and collapse these back together if you wanted that, right? Like, yeah.
Oh, did you know what? I do have one idea why with values might still be useful, but and so the one issue you have is with positional arguments, because if we don't know a value as a Boolean, here's the problem, like differentiating between -- foo with a positional after it versus -- foo with the value of that positional being assigned to it. Like that's where you start to get the ambiguity. And the problem is that if you hand a user your CLI, they're not going to know to put the equal sign between values. That's too constrictive. In my point of view, is people like to. This is a user-facing thing. Someone's going to grab your little command line application you've built, and they're going to try putting in -- foo without an equal sign, -- foo with a space. They're going to just play around with it. So unless you get strict about the equal sign, you do have a little bit of ambiguity around Boolean arguments versus the relationship between positionals. I'm just thinking like maybe I'm saying we don't need the positionals functionality though, because maybe you would maybe then as someone running the parser, you would have to know, oh, foo. Oh, actually, yeah, I think this works. So imagine that foo. Imagine you're building a program. I'm looking at foo equals true on the right-hand side there. Imagine you're building a program where foo is a Boolean. So it can be it can either have no value, which means it's true, or it can be given false, or it can be given true. But it cannot be given banana, because that's not that doesn't represent a Boolean. It's like banana is just a positional. If you use the approach you're advocating, I think we can still support it, because the parser can say the value of foo is banana, but I know I want foo to be Boolean. Banana is not true or false, so I'm actually going to treat banana as a positional. So I think I think I have enough information in values and args to, if I was writing a more complicated command line parser, do a little bit of validation and then push the appropriate things into a positionals array, you know,
Yourself. Let's do it yourself.
Exactly. Do it yourself. Yeah. That's my. So yeah, so you would, the only problem,
so I have
guess
some
the one
examples
problem
I
there,
think of
go
usage
ahead.
of positionals here. No, it's okay. Like, again, like kind of like making it easier for you to be like identifying flags versus like, you know, I imagine positionals would be useful for like, you know, for npm, it's like subcommands, right? Like, right.
How do you know that's a positional though and not the value of foo?
Because you haven't provided with value.
Okay. Gotcha. So, okay, that's an argument for keeping with values.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so with value, if you had -- foo space, you know, file name space file name, and you had with value, would that only come across with the one, you know, would the first file name only come through and the other one would be a positional? Like, what would that look like? I'm trying to see if any of your examples have that.
Okay, so let's do what you were talking about.
Yeah, like -- file and then two files, you know, imagining you're passing two files to some tooling.
So let's do, I don't know why that became JSON. So you're saying file name?
Yeah, -- file space, you know, a.js space b.js. What would you get in those instances?
Sorry, 1 second. Let's do this.
Helpful for me to like see examples that I have in my head.
So in this case, and what are you passing to? Are you passing anything to parseargs or no?
Oh, you tell me.
Okay, so how would you like this to be returned? Because right now, let's say that you get back args values and positionals, right?
Yeah.
What would be returned essentially in args would be args, it'd be files. File is true. And then with values, it would be like that would be essentially
Empty.
nothing.
Yeah.
Empty. And then you would have positionals. Sorry, this would actually not be empty, it'd be undefined. And then positionals would be A and B.
So if you had -- file A, B, and then -- something else, you know, CD, can you map that? You know, can you use that in your tooling? Like, I'm trying to figure out how, maybe this isn't even like a realistic use case. I'm not sure. I don't do a lot of tool writing, but, you know, if you had two more positionals, would this work or no?
I think it would be hard to go back to where you were. But what I will say though, Joe, is in Yargs, and I think it's the right approach. If the way I advocate arrays would you'd actually have foo multiple times. So you'd have like -- foo A, -- foo B, -- foo C. And I think we could probably make that work with values, I think.
So if you did this, C, right? And then we did with value foo, what would happen today is that a foo would be C. Should be, I think, array.
Because you would need to put multiples for that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, wouldn't that be foo A and C? Or would it not be?
No, because you haven't put multiples yet. So the key here is we could copy and paste this example and then show you how the output would change when you provide multiples. So let's do the exact same example, but now you say multiples and then foo. And now you essentially have values is foo is now an array of A B and C. And C, and then you get rid of the, positionals are no longer, in both of these cases, there's no positionals.
I think I don't like that it eats the A and the B, because that to me like creates a real ambiguity between positionals and arguments.
Oh, sorry.
But I like that I like that you'd get the A and the B. Like that to me is the 90. To me, that's the 80% case, and that's how I tend to write command lines, and how I think Yarg should advocate people do it.
So this makes sense the way Darcy just updated, and you have AC and positionals as B.
Yeah, sorry, I mixed that up. Yeah. Again, the reason why I want to do essentially this design work and bring this first as a design and update the doc is just, again, so we can ideate, come to a consensus. And then this is, again, like kind of the approach that I talked with Joe about, like that I think this is the right way to like present it before we go and do any work again, right? So, yeah. How do you think about this, Ben, like in terms of
I like it. The only thing I flag is like, I wonder if the bottom is just how with value should work without multiples, but that's just an opinion. Like, I think it's good either way. I like it.
Sorry.
So you're saying, Ben, if I understand you correctly, that if you get rid of multiples, you just always grab multiples. You don't destroy anything. You don't take the last one. You just always.
As long as they keep their ordering, then I think the person could get the behavior of with value without multiples, with one less setting, right? Because if you only care about the last value, just take the last value. Otherwise, turn it into an array if we provided it multiple times. And then it just removes one configuration setting, which is maybe nice.
Yeah, and that does raise the other question Darcy and I were talking about. Should it always be an array in values?
I think yes, maybe just for simplicity's sake. Yeah,
I think so too.
And then you get one if with values is, yeah, exactly. And it might be more if you've provided foo 3 times. The like A B case where like you would want foo to get A and B, I think that's just riddled with parsing edge cases. Like I don't even have that turned on by default in Yargs, because I think it creates a pain in the neck.
Yeah, when I was doing some research, one of the examples I saw was like passing 2 files, for like merge or, some sort of diff, something. But I guess
that's, I guess, one thing we become unable to do, right?
Yeah. But you could write some logic to make that work.
Those would maybe be positionals in that kind of example.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And like you could do like
if you think of a command
all
like
the
copy.
Positionals will be files or something. Yeah.
Yeah, if you think of a command like copy, yeah, exactly. Source and destination are positionals. I think I like this in general. I think it would be great to share this doc, and then maybe we can I'd be curious to look at some of the CLIs that I've written and see if this handles all the cases. But in general, I like it a lot. I like that it's been simplified. I like that, basically there's no way for this to throw an error or an exception now, right? You're going to end up with whatever parsed arguments, and then it's kind of up to you if you want to validate those in some way to do that, right?
Yep. Yeah, which is nice. That really simplifies it.
Yeah, I was in the original discussion, I was kind of against the idea of it ever throwing. And so I think just removing that concern is great.
Yeah.
Yes, I similarly really like this idea.
One thing I will say, so yeah, it sounds like we're all on board with this and we all like this. I think this is different enough from the original proposal that we're going to probably get a new set of concerns and comments.
So, again, kind of looking at the changes here between the two docs, like I do definitely want to like round this out. Maybe put this into a doc that like we can collaborate on, or like just give the HackMD reference in an issue in the Node tooling working group first. Let's like really hammer this and provide a whole bunch of examples, and then really flush this out. And then my hope is that actually like we would provide that or get some reviews done and almost get like approval before we do the work. It's almost like it's the RFC process that, we'll get the approval from the folks, especially the folks that had sort of contentious like feedback before. Let's try to get them on board, and then there should be, then we can do the legwork to change the existing work to accommodate this.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that it being different is a reason we shouldn't do it. I think this is an improvement. I'm just, I think we are going to get kind of like another round of
yeah.
That's great. That's what we hope. Validate our assumptions or the work. Yeah.
Also, no matter what we do, we'll get another round.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, in general, I like the simplification of this a lot.
Cool.
Oh, and I think it definitely covers the 80% case, which is great. Which I think.
Yeah, definitely. Please share that HackMD doc, and then because I'm curious to, like I said, look at some of the CLIs that I've built and just make sure it's kind of doing what I would expect it to do.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think I said the 99 case. Ben saying the 80% case is that folks will use the args object as an indicator of whether you want a force flag. You want to support a force flag. You can literally pull that out. Yeah.
I could imagine us exposing some more little helpers right out of Node. So you could because Python, you can run an HTTP server with, I think, like Python serve or something. Like it would be neat to be able to do like node fs rm and get rid of a folder, because that's something you have to do in your npm scripts all the darn time. Like I think just having
No.
I think having a command line parser in Node, I think it will be neat to see what comes out of it, because I think it will enable a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I definitely want to see this go over the finish line here. So that's what.
Yeah, I mean, once if you want to go over the design doc again, Darcy, just to make sure what we talked about is clear and examples look good, and we can share it. I'm happy to start looking into implementation, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I don't have that much time day to day, so if I can help manifest this in some way, and that'd be great.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to help write test cases, that's always helpful too.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I think this is great progress. Looks really good.
Cool. Excellent.
Maybe I could help push this forward somehow.
Yeah. Well, you've already done a lot of good work there, so thank you.
Cool. I'm excited. This has renewed excitement for me, so that's awesome.
Yeah. We've only got a couple minutes left. Anyone have any last minute topics or announcements, anything like that?
NPM 7 went to general availability on Tuesday. Feel free to poke us.
How's your week been?
multiple days with multiple pots of coffee. But no, it's been to keep up with all the great news and folks giving, it's been a good response so far. And we're staying on top of feedback, and we want people to roll forward with us. So it's great. Like big performance improvements and like a lot of just a lot of wins. So
that's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Cool. So, maybe ping us when you can share the doc, and we can iterate and go forward on that. I look forward to it.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Have a good weekend.